Okay, we're going to continue our discussion of mitzvot aseh shazman grama, and whether women are obligated or exempt, and where does it come from. So last time we saw the discussion in the Talmud about tzitzit and tefillin, and they were talking about how those two mitzvot are equated to Talmud Torah. So whatever applies to Talmud Torah applies to this as well. We saw that also that it was a bit of a stretch. I mean, that argument was not easy to make because those are three mitzvot that are grouped together. The mitzvah of mezuzah, tefillin, kirat shema, not tzitzit, sorry, mezuzah, tefillin, kirat shema. They are grouped together. So there's no reason to say you're only obligated in number 1 and 2 and 1 and 3. And also the reason for the rabbis to say women are obligated in mezuzah is that immediately after mezuzah it says le'ma'an yirbu yemechem v'yimei benechem, so you'll have long life. And they say women also want long life, but it's obvious that the bracha applies to all the statements that were made before. So let's look at this text before we look at kiddushin. Actually, let's look first. This is kiddushin. This is the sugya that we're doing. The Gemara asks this: lelamdot Torah. The father must teach the son Torah. The Gemara asks, minalan, minayin lanu, right? How do we know this? And the Gemara answers, dichtiv velimadetem otam et benechem. It said every day in the Shema, you should teach your children, literally your sons. And we'll see if it means literally only sons and not daughters. Ve'echa de la agmere avu, and if the father did not teach the son, mihayeviu lemigmar nafshe, he has to study on his own. Dichtiv ulmadetem, because it's written as, you could read it also ulmadetem, and you should learn. This is a nice midrash, but as I usually comment, when we see a midrash like that, we should ask, does it really stem from the text, or we already have a halacha and we try to hook it back to the text? You can read the word as ulmadetem, with all due respect to the Hebrew language. We have a great respect to the Hebrew language, and with all due respect to the midrashic techniques, the Hebrew doesn't have nekudot, but you read it with context. We know how to read Ivrit without nekudot because we read it in context. The word to read the word ulmadetem, you should learn, wouldn't work with the text because the pasuk says velimadetem otam et benechem. If I change it to ulmadetem, I would translate it, you will learn them, your children. It doesn't work. What we do, maybe the midrash is this: velimadetem otam et benechem, you must teach your children. How can you teach your children if you didn't learn? And that might be the meaning of the midrash. Not literally that we read it as ulmadetem, but rather it is contained in the question, and in the commandment that you must know, otherwise you won't be able to teach. And I think that's the beauty also of the Haggadah, when we talk about the children asking questions, which is in the Torah, right? Your son is going to ask you, and you should be able to answer. It's not a good idea to promote and to encourage the children to ask a question at the Seder table just to say, I don't know the answer, right? So it encourages us to study as well. Now, ihi minalan de la mihaiva, how do we know that she is not obligated to study Torah? Dichtiv velimadetem ulemadetem. It is written, you should teach, you should learn, like we just suggested, right, in the Talmud. Kol shemetzuver lilmod, metzuver lelamed. If you're obligated to learn, you're also obligated to teach. V'chol she'eno metzuver lilmod, eno metzuver lelamed. And if you're not obligated to learn, you're not obligated to teach. Okay, so now you brought me to the point of saying she is not obligated to teach because she's not obligated to learn. So we ask the question, how do we know? How do we know that she's not obligated to learn by herself? Dichtiv v'limadetem ulmadetem. We flip the drasha, and we say, כל שאחרים מצווים ללמדו, מצווה ללמד את עצמו, וכל שאין אחרים מצווים ללמדו, אינו מצווה ללמד את עצמו. If you're obligated to learn, you're obligated to teach. I'm sorry. If you're obligated to be taught by others, you're obligated to teach yourself. And if not, so it's sort of like dragged out. And it's probably a later edition, not later edition. This is the work of the Savoaim, the generation after the Talmud. So now we got finally to this, where the Talmud cornered itself, we could say. So, okay, now you went through the stages. Learning by yourself, teaching others, being taught by others. How do we know? How do we know that others are not obligated to teach her? So eventually we narrowed it to this very specific point. The Torah says, and it's only your sons and not daughters. So and that is how we exempt women from Talmud Torah. The problem with this, if we look at the full pasuk here, ולימדתם אותם את בניכם לדבר בם, שבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך. If we look at the whole text, right? We know that. Actually, let's enlarge this a little bit. Okay. We start here. Yeah. ואהבת, we want to see the full thing in context, right? ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך ושמרת משמרתו וחוקותיו ומשפטיו ומצוותיו כל הימים. Love Hashem and guard his and his laws and his commandments all your whole life. וידעתם היום, and you should know today, כי לא את בניכם אשר לא ידעו ואשר לא ראו את מוסר השם אלוהיכם. I'm not commanding only your children or sons, we'll see. Rather, כי עיניכם הרואות את כל מעשי השם הגדול אשר עשה, in verse 7. Right? But when he says, I'm not commanding your sons who were not part of it. It's sons and daughters, right? Anyway, that's in the beginning of that paragraph, and then we read it. V'ayayim shamoat tishme'u, yeah, yes. V'ayayim shamoat tishme'u el mitzvotai, asher anuchi metzaveh etchem hayom, le'ahava et Hashem Elohechem u'la'avdo b'chol levavchem u'b'chol nafshechem. Can anyone say logically that this pasuk, if you will listen to my mitzvot, that I command you in the plural today to love Hashem your God, again plural, and serving with all your heart and all your soul, that this only refers to men and not to women? No.
If you're going to divide by gender, then none of this applies to women,
right?
Even Hashem. So it's very convoluted that they would pull that one piece out, because otherwise half the Torah doesn't apply to women, because it's all in the masculine, because Hebrew makes masculine neutral.
Right, exactly. So let me minimize this. Okay, I'm going to close this one. We'll go now to the Yerushalmi. Yeah. So here's the Mishnah that speaks about that. Nashim va'avadim uktanim pturim mikirat shema umin atfilin v'chayavim b'tfila uvimzuza u'b'birkat hamazon. So women and slaves and minors are exempt from kirat shema and from tefillin, and they're obligated in tefillah, mezuzah, and birkat hamazon. And the Yerushalmi is more direct. Nashim minayin. How do we know that women are exempt? דכתיב ולימדתם אותם את בניכם ולא את בנותיכם. So teach your children, your sons, and not your daughters. So the Yerushalmi doesn't talk about Talmud Torah, it speaks about Kriyat Shema. But apparently Kriyat Shema and Talmud Torah are the same. Because this is the same limud, the same method that the Bavli later uses. And if we ask the question, are they really the same? So let's see this Gemara. This is in Menachot, Daf Tzadik Tet Amud Bet. The Gemara speaks about the bread, the lechem apanim that was presented in the temple constantly. Rabbi Yosef Omer, they speak about how do you change because the Torah says that you have to remove the old bread, right? Every week. You take out the old loaves of bread and you put new ones. They remain fresh the whole week, which seems to be a miracle, but it's not, because it was matzah, and matzah doesn't go bad. It's like for a week, it could stay. So they remove, so they're supposed to remove one and put the other one immediately. And then there's discussion in the Talmud, are you removing one? There are 6 loaves on each side. So do you remove one and put one so it's never empty? They get very concerned about that. It has to be perfect. Rabbi Yosef says, oh, don't worry. Afilu silek et hayeshana shacharit v'sider et hachadasha arvit, en bechach klum. Even if the Kohen removed the old bread in the morning and didn't put the new bread until the evening, it's okay. Why? Ma ani mekayem lefanai tamid, but the Torah says you have to have lechem panim lefanai tamid. The bread should be there constantly. Shelo yalin shulchan belo lechem. The tamid means we don't want to have a situation where the table is left without bread. It has to be loaded with or presented with the bread on it. So if you only, as long as in the morning there was bread there, and in the evening there was bread there, even though during the day there was nothing on the table, it still counts as constant presence of bread in the temple. And here the Gemara makes a very interesting leap, very interesting analogy. Amar Rabbi Amei, midvarav shel Rabbi Yossi nilmod. I could learn something from the statement of Rabbi Yossi. What is this that I could learn? Afilu lo shana adam ela perek echad shacharit uperek echad arvit. Even if you only studied 1 chapter in the morning and 1 chapter in the evening, kiyem mitzvat lo yamush sefer haTorah ze mipicha. The end of the pasuk is ve'agita bo yomam v'layla. So there is a mitzvah. That's how they read the mitzvah. Lo yamush sefer haTorah ze mipicha. That Torah scroll would not move, will never be removed from your mouth. Meaning that's what you have to do always, constantly. You have the Torah in your mouth, and you have to study it day and night. And apparently, this is how people interpret in the yeshivot, that you have to study day and night, and you can miss a day, a moment of learning. You learn until you fall asleep. And remember, when I was in yeshiva, it was a big issue in the yeshiva. I know the shmuz, the musar that the rabbi used to teach was always, as much as we did wasn't enough. And if I would stay in the Ben Midrash till 12:30, I had friends who would stay till 1 o'clock, and they kept pushing out to do even more. And remember that in one of the talks by the Mashgiach, he said that we're nothing. You think that's dedication? You think that's devotion? He says that in the previous generation, one of the rabbis praised one of the Talmidim that he didn't go to sleep unless he had to crawl to bed. And the rabbi who heard the praise says, what? He still had energy to crawl? Meaning he should have right? And this is how it's hammered into the minds of the yeshiva students all over, and they made to feel that they're not doing enough. And it was refreshing to see, when my kids went to yeshiva and they kept calling me, like they say, I'm in mashber, I'm in a crisis, I can learn well enough. I said, hey, you're calling me from Israel. It's 1 a.m. Why are you not in bed, right? I said, no, but I have to learn. I said, by that time, I already knew what to tell him. I said, the real matmid, if you really want to learn well, you have to sleep on time, eat on time, and learn on time. You have to divide your day wisely. And Rabbi Yosef Messas writes about it in the first response in his Shalot Tshuvot Ma'im Haim. He says, to have a good night's sleep is extremely important. If you don't do that, your limud Torah is not worth it. It's not valid, but it's not what it could have been if you slept well. But this is not how it's taught in the yeshivot. And then you have this paragraph in the Talmud that says, if you studied one chapter in the morning, and one chapter in the evening, you're done. You fulfilled the mitzvah. And here the author of that statement understand that mitzvah not as a technical thing that you have to sit and study or read the Torah every day, like every moment, but rather as a moral directive. The Torah should guide you whatever you do. You remember it in the morning, you remind yourself in the evening, right? And then there's the next statement in the Gemara is this: Afilu lo kara adam ela kriyat shema shacharit ve'arvit yatsa yedei chova. To fulfill the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, if you read Kriyat Shema in the morning and you read Kriyat Shema in the evening, you're good. You study Torah day and night.
Rabbi?
Now, yes, Susie.
Didn't it occur to any of these people in the yeshivot that, like, well, what about the rabbis of the Talmud who we know that they had professions and that they weren't staying all day in the yeshiva?
Yeah, 100%. They were workers. We have Rabbi Yitzhak Napaha, who was a blacksmith. Rabbi Yochanan Sandlar was a shoemaker. There were rabbis who told their students, don't talk to me on Tishrei and Nisan. It's the harvest time. I'm busy. And throughout the generations, there were doctors. There were when Reb Moshe Feinstein was asked if they could continue, I think it was about him. Maybe Reb Israel Salanter in Europe, but if they could continue with the tradition of the kolelim, of people sitting in a kolel and learning constantly, he said we could do it because it's necessary. It's an emergency measure. Et la'asot l'Hashem eferu toratecha. He almost said we have to break the law to maintain the law. But he says, let them go and study, but not more than 2 years, and then they have to go out and work and do something productive for the community. But at some point, people got into that mindset of learning Torah for the sake of learning Torah. In different discussion that I had today, actually with the group of women who study halacha, one of them brought up this issue, and she said there is a certain type of learning that is narcissistic. It's self-serving. So, and it's true, because I used to hear this argument, and actually at one time I heard the argument when I was in the bus, and everything happens on the bus in Israel. You could discussions, politics, everything. So the guy comes on the bus, and he had it was a yeshiva boy, and someone said, hey, why don't you go, you have to serve in the army, and the other one says, hey, you think, leave him alone, you think it's easy? You think it's easy to sit and study Torah all day? Let's see you, if you could do it, right? And it's a very common argument, in the yeshiva world. We are willing to study Torah day and night. It's amazing, it's a commitment, but I'm sorry to say, it's really not. The commitment in Talmud Torah is to apply the lessons of the Torah. To study it, if someone sits in the yeshiva all day, at a certain point, that person enjoys the mental exercise, the back and forth, Those who can, by the way, and from personal experience, there are many who can't, and at a certain point, it doesn't interest them anymore. But they linger there because if they get out, they will be labeled as dropouts in the yeshiva, where the pressure is tremendous. And it's a shame because the system doesn't allow people to leave. So there was a system like that where some people would study all day long, and other people would tell them, hey, you should really engage in real life activities. And they were not Jewish at all. They were the Stoics in Greece, the philosophers who would all day engage in philosophical discussions that would lead nowhere. And they enjoyed it. That for them, that was the world. It has nothing to do with Talmud Torah. Some people just enjoy that kind of, in the case of Talmud Torah, it just grew to dimensions that never existed before. The Torah, the Gemara says very clearly, if you go back here, that you could fulfill the obligation with the Kriyat Shema day and night. Why do you think? I mean, first of all, let me ask if is there anyone here who are not familiar with that statement, that the obligation of Talmud Torah you could be fulfilled with the morning and evening? And if so, why is it that not enough people know about it? Because the Gemara actually says, don't publicize this. We don't want people to know that they can fulfill the learning Torah day and night. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I want to actually, push back a little bit on the notion that, I'm just going to take a look at you. You are unbelievably malumad. That is a blessing. That is a wonderful thing. And so I think the problem with the yeshiva system is that it's a mass thing, and they'll also ask other people to take up the burden of supporting them and of not serving in the army. That's a whole other issue. But that we shouldn't have an elite, who can, or even an aspiration, if not maybe to sit for 20 hours a day, but that people shouldn't be able to go past the minimum. And really, it is shocking to me. The more I study, this is not a self-effacing statement. This is meant on. It's just the truth. It is really a yam. It is really an enormous ocean. So I don't see the goal of having Torah study being more than the minimum for the masses, and also being a full-time job for an elite. I see that as just like we have universities, where certain people get PhDs and they specialize, for their lives. I don't see that as necessarily a problem.
No, I hear. Thank you for that, Yoel. Now so I clarify. I don't think that people should go for the minimum, and I don't think that the maximum should become the standard. If things are presented correctly, the rabbis of back then and today, I think that the message is that Talmud Torah is transformative. It changes our life. It should really be something that changes you as a person. If a person studies Torah, actually, that was one of the concerns of Rabbi Salanter when he started the Musar movement, which I think in a way succeeded for a while, and then it was derailed again by the halachists, because he wanted people to study morals and ethics, and then finally when they accepted that you should study morals and ethics, they made it into another field of halacha, and then they started dealing with it not in a transformative way, but as another mitzvah to fulfill. But what Rabbi Salanter said was this: it's easier to study the Talmud 70 years straight than change one character trait. So the benefit of Talmud Torah is that it changes our behavior for the better, right? So if someone can, I would say even if someone can afford, not to be a burden on the community, he has the money, has the wherewithal to sit and study all day long, right? But if that study is directed only for that person's self benefit and joy, it is selfish. I'm not saying that you're not allowed to do things that benefit only you. It's okay to sit and and relax and whether you're studying or doing a puzzle or watching a movie or hiking, whatever. But a certain portion of your day and of your time must be allocated to work for the well-being of others, and that's where I see the problem. Like when I'm very connected to the yeshiva world, especially through my children and colleagues and all that. And once in a while, I get a book and say, "Oh, look at this new book." And say, "Okay, I look at the book. Lakewood, in Lakewood, the yeshiva boys are students are encouraged to print out their work, and I'm like, almost every day a new book comes out, but those are books about esoteric issues in halacha that are irrelevant today. For example, if an animal delivering its young died while delivering, and the head of the calf came out, is it bechor or not? And what if it put its hooves on the? We don't do this today. You have 300 pages on that subject, and how did it change the world? This is so for me. The Torah is ve'agita bo yomam v'layla. That when we say that you say Kriyat Shema morning and evening, a simple person who does maybe that cannot learn well, but reads Kriyat Shema in the morning and the evening, and for him the Kriyat Shema guides his life. This is the real Talmud Torah, and so again, you need an elite. You need an elite, but that elite should be there for the people. It's not an elite that is removed from the people. And there's a beautiful story about that I really like. About the Vilna Gaon. The people like to hear the Gaon of Vilna. He was the greatest scholar. He had no parallel. They say almost maybe 2,000 for the last 2,000 years. And the story is told that one year before Yom Kippur, he called. He asked Rabbi Yaakov Kranz, the Dubna Magid. The Magid of Dubna was a moral, like what today would be called a motivational speaker, right? The Magid, to come to his office, to come to his study. So the Magid comes to the Gaon and he says, "Yes, what do you want?" He says, "I need you to give me musar, right? I need you to rebuke me, to criticize me." And the Magid was flabbergasted. It says, "Me, you now, I can't do that. It's you're the God, you're the And he says, "Please, please do it, because if you don't do it, I don't have anyone who would do that. I need to hear from you. I need to." So he looked at him for a while, and then he said, "You think it's a big deal being a tzaddik and studying Torah the way you do, shutting yourself in your study? Go out to the people. Go walk in the markets and see what people are doing, and keep being a tzaddik and studying Torah. That's the challenge." And the story, according to the story, Rabbi Eliyahu of Vilna started crying. So that's why I'm sure I know you're on the same page on that. I think, right? That's but I'm saying it went awry. It went to the situation where we have really that separation. Like the elite is, everybody studies, the simpletons don't study. Then they came this movement of the Daf Yomi. Everybody studies, right? So people do Daf Yomi. And for some people it's transformational. For others, it's just okay. I belong to this group, that studies. But how does it change them? I guess for some people, yes, because they have the commitment, they have to go every day and they learn. But it has to be. I mean, I cannot qualify people's learning. You said correct. I love teaching and I love learning myself, but I want it to be always directed to the well-being of others. So I think that's what went missing, you know. Well, you touched for me an open nerve, and that's like I keep talking about that. Yeah. What do you think, Yoel? Is that?
Yes, I agree. I think, part of the issue may be that it's not only that the yeshivot are too narrow and that their hashkafot are not ones that we agree with. In other words, I think if they were producing, let's say, humanist Torah of Ava, I think you would feel differently about the enterprise.
Yeah, listen, I feel the change. I see the change. I think that there is now. I think the big part of what happened to the yeshiva world uh, in Europe after the emancipation and all over the world after the Holocaust, we were always in a mode of we were on the defense and we were putting out fires. We were protecting our past instead of focusing on the present, the future. So everything that comes from the outside looks threatening. In a funny way, the COVID virus opened the world for a lot of people. Even now, look at our group. We are, you know, we are joining from all over the world. From a lot of us are in the United States and Canada, but Brazil and Trinidad are also and the West Coast are also represented, so people could connect and learn. And I I want to share this story. Uh, I just spoke with my son, who's he's in Lakewood, but he's a little sort of an outlier in Lakewood. His wife is a lawyer. He's learning to be Dayan, so he's doing practical things for the community. And he was this. My son was studied in Reb Reuven Feinstein Yeshiva, the son of Reb Moshe Feinstein. And as you know, Rabbi Reb David Feinstein just passed away. There wasn't a big halvaya there. They did the sped, and he told me two stories. One of them I remember, but the other one was, says during the hesped, like one of the eulogies that they did, they read a text message that was sent by the rabbi's aide, the man who helped him in his last years. It didn't work for him for the last 3 years, and that person was not Jewish. And my son tells me that the yeshiva world was shocked that they are reading a text from a non-Jewish aide to the rabbi in the hesped, the eulogy for someone like Rabbi David Feinstein. That is where all the great rabbis come and talk. It says it's uncommon that it says, but this is the Feinstein family. Moshe Feinstein was also like that. He was a great scholar, but he was very connected to the people. And he said the message that they wanted to send is that who you are as a student of Torah or as a master of Torah is how your image is reflected and how you affect and impact people around you. So yes, this is I think is an important lesson. Anyway, let's go back to this text in Menachot and see what happens. So we say if you read morning and evening, you're good. ודבר זה אסור לאומרו בפני עמי הארץ. You're not allowed to say this to the ignoramuses. You can't, because they will take an advantage of not learn. But Rava disagrees. Several hundred years later, Rava says, "Mitzvah leomro b'fnei amei haaretz." Yes, do teach them that they could fulfill mitzvot Talmud Torah with Kriyat Shema morning and evening. But I think, we're going to continue with the Gemara and Kiddushim later, but I think that this it really exacerbates the question about Talmud Torah for women. What would it take for the rabbis to say that women should say Kriyat Shema morning and evening. Why are they excluded? And I think that it's very hard to base it in the pasuk. It's very hard to pin it to the benechem velo benotechem, like Shana said, because then you would take half the Torah doesn't apply. It always says benechem, your sons, and not your daughters. And I think that what we see here is it's a systemic approach to what women should or should not do. This is methodical. Women are relegated to one aspect of Jewish life. We don't want them to be involved. The Talmud Torah becomes the dominion of men. Even what we find in the Torah, that great leaders like Devorah, like Huldah, prophets, Miriam, they're eventually being played down. There's a new period in Jewish history, that the rabbinical times, and the rabbis pushed women out, unfortunately, and that is something that has to be corrected. So we'll go back to the Gemara. We'll continue discussing that the sugya in Kiddushin of the obligation of women to fulfill the mitzvot that are time dependent. But we see now that the connection between the association between the two, all the other mitzvot, tefillin, and tefillin is the gateway to the other mitzvot. They all depend on the analogy to Talmud Torah, which in itself has very little basis in the psukim.